Caroline never sought danger, never imagined herself at the edge of something so intoxicatingly wrong. And yet, when Alexander's gaze lingered just a moment too long, when his voice dipped into something lower, something heavier, she felt it a spark. A whisper of something forbidden. David used to look at her like that once. Back when love was fresh. Before routine swallowed them whole. But now, David barely looked at her at all. She told herself it was harmless. That Alexander's compliments were just kindness. That his presence in her life was coincidental. Innocent. But then why did her pulse quicken whenever he was near? Why did the air seem too thick when they were alone? It was absurd. Unthinkable. He was young, confident, hungry for life in a way she had long forgotten how to be. And maybe that was the real reason she didn't pull away, not yet. Because when he said her name, when he leaned just a little closer than necessary, she felt seen. A part of her, a reckless, desperate part, wanted to lean in, just to see how far the moment would go before it collapsed into reality. Because reality was cold, but this was fire. At first, it was nothing, just passing glances, polite smiles, the kind of fleeting exchanges that meant everything and nothing at all. Alexander had always been charming, effortlessly so, but Caroline had never noticed not like this. Not until the shift. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, like the faintest change in the wind before a storm. A look held a second too long. A touch that lingered when it shouldn't. She told herself it was in her head. That she was imagining the way his voice softened when he spoke her name. The way his presence seemed to fill the room even when he wasn't standing close. But then came the moments that made her question everything. The way his fingertips brushed against hers when he handed her a coffee mug. The way his voice lowered when they were alone. Just enough to send a shiver down her spine. It wasn't obvious, not enough to be called out. Not enough to accuse him of anything. But she felt it, a slow burn, creeping in like ivy wrapping around a crumbling wall. It was wrong. She knew that, but knowing didn't stop the way her breath caught in her throat every time he stepped just a little too close. Caroline told herself it was nothing. A harmless thrill, a fleeting moment of attention that would pass as quickly as it came. But the truth was far more complicated. She felt it, deep in her bones, the war between what was right and the quiet, aching pull of something forbidden. It wasn't love. No, love was steady, familiar, woven into the quiet rhythms of daily life. This was different. This was fire beneath her skin. A rush of something reckless, dangerous. And yet, every time Alexander stepped too close, every time his voice dipped into that low, knowing tone, she found herself standing at the edge of something she didn't dare name. She should stop this before it became something real, before it unraveled the life she had built with David. The security, the years of trust. But wasn't that life already unraveling? Hadn't she already begun to slip through the cracks? Long before Alexander whispered her name like it was a secret only they shared? Her mind screamed at her to pull away, to put an end to whatever this was. But her body betrayed her, drawn to the feeling of being wanted, of being seen. And so, the war raged on. At first, she thought she was imagining it. The subtle way Alexander spoke, the careful way he framed his words, each one designed to plant a seed of doubt in her mind. "You're overthinking things, Caroline. You don't have to be so tense around me." His voice was always light, casual, never forceful, never something she could call out. But beneath the surface, there was something deliberate, something calculated. Every word was chosen carefully, wrapped in a softness that made it easy to believe. She would catch herself wondering if maybe he was right. Maybe she was reading too much into things. Maybe the heat behind his gaze was just her own restless imagination. But then his hand would linger a second too long. His voice would drop just a little too low. And just when the unease would settle in her chest, he would smile, warm, reassuring, as if to say, "See, there's nothing to be afraid of." But there was. Because every time she questioned herself, she gave him a little more room to pull her deeper into the space he had carefully created, one where the lines blurred, where hesitation became permission, and where the truth was whatever he decided it should be. Caroline never meant to pull away from David. It just happened gradually, like the slow fading of a once vivid photograph. Conversations that used to flow effortlessly turned into quick exchanges. Pleasantries passed in the spaces between dinner and bedtime. She told herself she was just tired, distracted, but she could feel the weight of the distance growing between them. And Alexander was always there, filling the silence. She began avoiding places where she knew David would ask her how she was. She didn't want to lie, But she couldn't tell him the truth either, not when she wasn't sure what the truth even was. She told herself she was imagining things. That Alexander's presence wasn't consuming her thoughts. That his words weren't lingering long after he left. But then why did she feel her breath hitch every time she heard a knock at the door? Wondering if it would be him? She stopped answering calls from friends, brushing off invitations with excuses that felt too flimsy to believe. The walls of her world were closing in. But somehow, the space between her and Alexander kept shrinking. He was always there, as if he knew exactly when she was most vulnerable. No matter where she went, Alexander was there, not always in person, but in the way the air felt heavier when she was alone. In the way her thoughts drifted to him even when she willed them not to. His presence lingered like the scent of something intoxicating, unshakable, inescapable. She'd step into the kitchen, expecting solitude, only to find him already there, leaning against the counter as if he belonged. She'd walk through the garden, hoping for a moment of quiet, only to hear his voice behind her, smooth and knowing. "You spend too much time alone, Caroline." It was never overt, never forceful. He never demanded her attention, he simply existed in her space in a way that made it impossible to ignore him. And when he wasn't there, she still felt him, in the echo of his voice, in the way her skin tingled at the memory of his touch, in the lingering weight of the things he left unsaid. She told herself it was coincidence, that he wasn't watching, waiting, but deep down, she knew better. Alexander was always there, and the worst part? A part of her was starting to expect him, to anticipate the moment he would appear. The moment it happened, Caroline knew there was no turning back. It wasn't dramatic, not a grand explosion of passion or betrayal. It was something quieter, more insidious, like a lock clicking shut in a room she hadn't realized she'd stepped into. A touch that lingered too long. A breath against her skin. A whisper laced with quiet certainty. She had spent weeks pretending she was in control, that she could put a stop to this whenever she wanted. But now, standing in the dimly lit space between what was right and what was inevitable, she realized she had already lost. Alexander wasn't pushing anymore, he didn't have to. "You can't pretend forever, Caroline," he murmured, his voice warm, coaxing. His fingers brushed against hers. And this time, she didn't pull away. She wanted to. God, she wanted to. But her body betrayed her. Frozen in place, her breath catching as his touch traced familiar lines down her arm. It was a single moment, stretched unbearably thin, where she could still escape. All she had to do was move, to step back, to say no. But she didn't. And in that stillness, the line between hesitation and surrender blurred into nothing. David wasn't blind. He wasn't the type to pry, to question Caroline's every move. But he knew when something was wrong. The way she avoided his eyes. The way her hands fidgeted when she spoke. The way she seemed to exist just a little further away than before. The warmth between them had cooled, replaced by something quieter, something unsettling. He would reach for her at night, but she would turn away, murmuring that she was tired. He would ask about her day, and her answers would be clipped, rehearsed, as if she were reading from a script. There was a space between them now, one he couldn't name, but he could feel it growing. Caroline could feel it, too, every time she looked at him. Guilt knotted deep in her chest. She still loved him. That was the cruelest part. David had been her home, her constant, but the walls of their marriage had begun to feel more like a cage. And Alexander had been the first one to show her the cracks. She wanted to fix it, to close the gap before it became too wide. But how could she fix something when she was the one pulling away? The moment the truth came crashing down, Caroline felt like the air had been sucked from the room. David's voice was low, eerily calm, the kind of quiet that was far worse than yelling. The photos lay between them on the table, damning evidence of something she hadn't even admitted to herself. Alexander standing too close, a touch that lingered, a gaze too intense, proof of every mistake she had tried to bury. "Tell me it's not what it looks like," David said, his jaw clenched so tightly she thought it might break. Her throat felt raw, her pulse hammering in her ears. There was no excuse, no lie that could make this go away. Across the room, Alexander leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his expression unreadable, calm, smug, untouchable. "She wanted it too," Alexander finally said, his voice as smooth as ever. The words sent a shudder through Caroline, her stomach twisting with something between fury and devastation. This was how he played the game, turning her hesitation into consent. twisting reality until she didn't even know what was true anymore. David exhaled, stepping back like he didn't recognize her anymore. God, Caroline, what have you done? Even after Alexander was gone, he wasn't really gone. His presence still clung to the corners of Caroline's mind. A shadow she couldn't shake. A whisper she couldn't silence. She would catch herself expecting him, feeling his eyes on her even in an empty room. She knew it was just her imagination. The lingering residue of everything that had happened, but knowing didn't make it any less real. David tried. He really did. There were nights when he would sit beside her, quiet and exhausted, waiting for her to speak. But what could she say? That she had let something unravel inside her? That she had let herself be pulled into something she didn't understand until it was too late? The house felt different now. Colder, emptier, and yet, even in that emptiness, she could still feel him the way Alexander had stood too close. The way his words had wrapped around her like silk and steel. One night, she stood by the window, staring out into the dark street. A shadow moved beneath the street lamp, just a trick of the light. She told herself, but deep down, she wasn't sure. Because some ghosts never really leave, and neither did he. In today's world, manipulation and emotional entanglement can happen in the most unexpected places. Boundaries matter, whether in personal relationships, workplaces, or social circles. Recognizing when someone is pushing too far, too fast is crucial. Trust your instincts. If a situation feels off, don't second-guess yourself. Emotional manipulation often starts subtly through gaslighting, blurred lines, or misplaced guilt until it spirals beyond control. Open communication with your loved ones is key. Isolation makes you vulnerable, but speaking up can break the cycle. Protect your peace, honor your self-worth, and remember, true love and respect never come with confusion, fear, or secrecy.